voice, well, how are you really? And then to hear and hold the answer is incredibly powerful. But as human beings, we're hot wired for connection. We're hot wired to have these conversations and to reach out and see and hear each other. So what do you do? Yeah, and what do you do then to have conversations about work-life balance? And because as human, I mean, we're not built for that. We're built to work, yes, but also rest and recover. But it's almost like I don't know, is it the kind of, have we been brainwashed by the quote unquote American dream of you work hard and you'll succeed? Is that why everyone's working stupid hours? There must be some reason why there hasn't been a kind of uprising and revolt and because
someone has the dream, the person at the top.
Well, yeah,
they've got it. Because I remember when the 2008 housing crisis and everything, let's just repeat that. Housing crisis, my law firm decided that we needed to take a pay cut. Yeah. But we have a certain amount of billable hours every month that I have to bill so I don't get fired.
But then you take.
But my pay went down. Did the insurance companies decide they were going to pay less for the billable hours that I'm still working? So if I have 100 hours, I have to bill because of the housing market went down. Now the housing market, times are tough. Now I still have to bill 100 hours, but my pay rate went down.
Yeah.
And 100 hours is how many hours do you have to work to get 100 billable hours?
Right. 100 billable hours. Right.
Because that's even more,
Yeah. And then imagine being in the medical field, because after the pandemic, everything's starting to normalize. It's like, you got to get permission for incidental overtime. So just imagine being at work and having a crisis, and you have to finish up, you have to document to save yourself. And then you go and say, hey, Susie, I'm going to be punching out after 7:30. And it's like, why? Well, such and such, I just had that. Well, see if you can get out because we really want you to punch out at 7:30. And it's like, so then you're stressed. It's like they want everything done in 12 hours, but then at 6 o'clock, you had a major incident with a patient, a catastrophe where life-saving.
But you have to get your overtime approved in the middle of that.
Right. So it's like, it's like stressful, because it's like, okay, we need you off the clock at 7:30. Or I'm getting a phone call.
I'm saving a life over here.
Right. But then it's like the conversation is like, Renee, you didn't get permission because you clocked out at 7:45. Okay, remember that day I had to do this and this, but it's like, okay, did you delegate the task? Are you using your time more effective and efficiently? So it's like, that's the stress. Like, you got 12 hours.
Next time I'll ask the patient to have a heart attack 2 hours earlier.
Yeah.
Like that, at least I know I can manage it. And I have a question in that respect. How do you combine that with, being a frontline worker? I can only imagine even the PTSD and the compassion fatigue that you must have. How do you keep going back? Let's put it that way. How do you just not tell them just to shove it? Because between the frontline, all of the stuff that you must have seen as being a frontline worker during the pandemic at the worst of times, and then you're coming up with this sort of rubbish of, well, I'm sorry that 15 minutes is inconvenient. I know your patient was dying, but I would have preferred that you got that paperwork signed before you gave her CPR.
It's because of my obligation that I signed up for, my obligation. It's about the patients. So that's what keeps me going back every night. It's the patient. Because I love what I do. Because if I don't do it, who's going to do it?
Yes, and therein lie the reasons why many people who are passionate about their job burn out, because they keep coming back. And
Well, Joanna, when was your burnout point?
Yeah.
Like, what was with that? Finally, you said enough's enough and shove it.
So the first burnout as a grown, I mean, I had a mini burnout when I was 16 years old. I mean, a student doing all of these different things, you know, so I had it, you know, I had it.
I wasn't talking about all that.
Anyway, but no, so the first burnout at work is 2009. I was off for a month and super glued to the sofa and everything else. And when I came back, I remember coming back just after Christmas and my boss taking me to one side and saying, we've got a big meeting on Wednesday. I want you to go in there and knock their socks off. I needed to say I did, but it wasn't by going home at 4 o'clock that afternoon. So what happened then was straight back in at the same speed. Then there was the directorship promotion and everything else. And looking back at it, what I realized is I changed absolutely nothing when I went back after the first burnout. I just went back in at the same speed. And then 5 years later, after the OCD and the panic attacks and everything else, I ended up the same thing, burnout number 2. But what was different then was, okay, I describe it as walking through molasses in a world where all the joy and color has been sucked out of it.
Wow.
Super glued to the sofa, didn't want to eat, didn't want to wash, didn't want to go outside. And I sure as heck didn't want to tell anyone because that would be a sign of weakness. People came to me when they needed help. It wasn't the other way around. And then about 10 days in, I got an email to tell me that this guy, Peter, that I worked with in a not-for-profit at the same time as my day job, had died suddenly at the age of 67. And I thought, I need to go to this funeral because he's a gentleman and he's a gentleman and I just need to be there, even though it was the first time I'd been out of my apartment for weeks.
Wow.
And I go along to the funeral, to the memorial, and what I realized during the service is that he hasn't just had a heart attack, he actually had died by suicide. He'd spent the weekend with his friends. He'd suffered from depression for a long time, so he checked himself into a hospital. They spent the weekend with his friends, went to the jazz aperitif, he'd been to the movies. And then on the Monday morning, he got up, he went to the Red Bridge in Luxembourg and he jumped. And what really got to me during the eulogies and so on were his friends saying, but we'd have been there. If he told us, we'd have been there. So clearly he had this thought and belief that he couldn't ask anyone for help. And I remember getting back in the car afterwards and just starting to cry, and the realization of that this was a mirror of my life. I've never had suicidal thoughts, but the mirror was these thoughts that I can't tell my friends that I'm suffering. And I can't tell them because that would be a sign of weakness, and I can't tell them because I'm not the one to ask for help. And then that's when I picked up the phone and I rang my friend Lean, and she basically dropped everything. I went round to her place. We picked up her kid from the creche, and then she came to my apartment with him and slept over. So I wasn't, they stayed in the spare room, so I wasn't on my own. And then I had friends that kind of fed me and took me to hot yoga. But that was the turning point where it's like, if I don't do something, I'm going to be dead by 45. And wow. No doctor had said that. I had no diagnosis, but when you spend the evening in the emergency room because you've got heart palpitations that are so strong that you think you're having a heart attack, and when even the overthinking and the OCD stuff, just all of this stuff, OCD will never kill you, but it will certainly make your life hell. All of these things, and I just thought, if I don't change my life, I was 42 at the time. If I don't change my life, this is going to end messy. And that's when I decided to leave tax. That's when I decided to change my life, go to a therapist, get some more sleep.
Congrats.
And I was lucky to have the support from work, that they were happy for me to leave the department and move into a different department and co-create a new service line and do stuff there around public speaking coaching. as well as an industry role. And so I had an enormous amount of support, and it's really been since that was 2014. It's nearly 10 years now. The journey back has been a long one, but it's been and I think one of the, it's been a long journey back. And that's why I'm so passionate about, I don't want anyone else to wait until their life is falling apart before they reclaim it, you know? And that's why it's important for me to talk about this, even though it's a difficult subject. It's a shitty subject to talk about burnout, about feeling that low, and people can feel embarrassed about it and uncomfortable about it. But hopefully I bring it with humor and joy at the other side, about coming through to the other side. But I think one of the biggest learnings for me was I thought I was the only one basically rocking in a corner with their, thinking that their life was falling apart. But there are so many colleagues and friends and peers and my clients going through similar things at different stages on that road towards it.
Yeah.
And many of them also believing they're the only one to think it.
Well, I had so much go through me as you were telling your story, and felt all of it. And I've had that feeling countless times over and over. Like, it was just like, here's one. And we all think that no one cares. So no one wants to listen. No one really wants to be there for you.
And then also, you feel that everybody is too busy in their own life, doing their own thing. And I know, and it's funny that you said, Joanna, that a colleague had committed suicide, but I remember it was a nurse, and it was a male nurse. And he had come to work. He was a hard worker. And they said he came to work and everybody was just so busy. So he was like, I need to talk to you. Can you please come? They were like, no, just wait. And he was like, I need to talk to you. Go, okay, let's we'll talk. But everybody was just so busy. So they was like, in the morning, everybody was leaving. They was like, when you get a chance, call me or whatever. They said he walked and said, okay. He got home, kids and everything were gone, shot himself in the head. And the staff that was working, they had to go through counseling because they blamed themselves, because it was like, imagine had we taken that minute. All they can remember is him like, okay, all right. When the kids and the wife had left, he killed himself. Imagine that. And it was like, because everyone was too busy not to take that moment just to talk to him. And they could have saved his life. And they blamed themselves. They had to have time off. They had to go to counsel, employee. You know how they have the employee, what is it called? Employee EAP or whatever. But they suffered from that for a while.
I'm sure. I mean, I can't even imagine. And the irony of it is, it wasn't that they were playing video games or doing something nonsensical. I mean, they were saving lives elsewhere, and that doesn't take the guilt away. And I think, and I mean, the level of suicide among young men in particular is terrifying. And I think men in particular, find it very, very difficult to talk about what's going on. At least the perception of women that may be more willing to talk to girlfriends or whatever else. But you see how even just our reactions to that just reflect those thoughts and beliefs that we have around that sort of situation. And are they too, maybe everyone's busy, they won't care. Whereas if we just ask for help, and our friends want to help us. I mean, fundamentally,
but why do we all think that our friends aren't there, or our coworkers aren't there to help us? Because with your friend at the funeral, you heard everyone saying, I wish he would have called, I would have helped him. And that's kind of what these employees are going through, because he was basically asking all day long.
all night long. And he was like,
All night.
talk.
Yeah.
It was like, well, okay, we're busy. And then it was back to corporate America because you had 12 hours to get everything done at work.
Absolutely.
So it's like, okay, we'll talk. And then even leaving out, I got this to do. And they said the last thing was like, okay. And that was like, just imagine. And then you hear later on that the committed suicide when he got home. Like,
it's so difficult. I mean, the situation that Renee, that you explained is so tragic, and they're, you know, even in that situation, I mean, that situation where they're saving lives, and because it's difficult, because he's not going to say, hey, I want to commit suicide, can you stop a minute and talk to me? Because there's that, you know, there's also, you've got to get over that kind of barrier thing. And even in that situation, when they're not necessarily busy, we can still have that belief that everyone's going to be too busy. And that's, you know, earlier I was talking about the shitty committee. That's your shitty committee telling you that no one will care, no one will have time, no one wants to help. And that, you know, those are the, I don't know. I mean, there are smarter people than me that have talked about where these thoughts and beliefs come from. But I think the reality is, when I can only start to imagine, but I can't fully imagine what it must be like to be in that moment, and of that feeling of despair and hopelessness, that honestly believing that you don't have any way out but that. And I think that's there. I'm just glad that there are campaigns even more so now about mental health and reaching out and talking. And I watched one campaign, you know, essentially along the lines of, if you say, well, how are you? And they say, I'm fine, you ask it again. Because often,
because every time someone asks me, I'm like, what can I say differently? How can I not say I'm fine? So I'm actually trying to change myself, but now to have that.
But it's the idea as well that very often the reflex, oh, I'm fine, you know, because you don't, but no, it's like, no, how are you really? And be open to the answer. Because as well, you know, if someone turns around to you and says, well, I'm actually having a really tough time, then how can we be actually open to sit in that pain and let them speak? Because again, what pre-burnout, I mean, my life before burnout and after burnout in a lot of ways has been very different. Before burnout, arguably I was a lot less comfortable with other people's emotions because I wasn't comfortable with my own emotions. Now, you know, I watch NCIS, somebody, your man, what's his name, whose name I forget, from Alabama, he dies, I'm crying. Somebody else stubs their toe, I'm crying. So it's like all emotions everywhere. But maybe because I'm more comfortable with my emotions, I feel more comfortable to sit with somebody else's emotions and let them speak. But it's a big leap of faith when to be able to ask someone twice, well, how are you really? And then to hear and hold the answer is incredibly powerful. But as human beings, we're hot-wired for connection. We're hot-wired to have these conversations and to reach out and see and hear each other. Very often we can get wrapped up and swept along by what's happening in the world. Yeah. But when we really stop and listen and really stop and care, that connection is there, and we all have the tools to be able to do that. And it takes courage to reach out for help when you need it.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It takes a leap of faith to do it.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. It's worth it.
Well, besides asking the question twice, you know, how are you doing today? When you get the it's fine answer, what's something else that you think we could be doing to encourage others to know that we're here and we care and you can talk to me?
Well, I mean, I don't know a lot about.
You can ask me for help.
Yeah, you can ask me for help. Well, there's the whole suicide prevention thing, and I'm not in any position to be able to talk about what you do with somebody who's got suicidal thoughts, except, you know, you're in that.
Well, just like the burnout.
But just the burnout piece, absolutely. I think one of the best ways to encourage other people to reach out for help is to model that behavior yourself.
Yeah.
You know, because as soon as I started being ready, Yeah, as soon as I started being ready to ask for help or to say this sucks or I'm having a bad time of it, then I saw that other people were more willing to tell me that they were having a bad time of it, or the moments of joy as well, you know. But I think it's leading by example in that respect, because the words, oh, you know, I'm always here if you need help, can sound very hollow depending on who's hearing it, if that makes sense.
Well, I've tried to say that, rephrase that question, because when in the last few years, when I needed to use it, instead of if you need help, clearly you need help with something, I'm here for you. Let me know what that is, you know? So taking that if you need help and trying to change that question.
Yeah. I noticed that you're feeling down. I would like to help you, and just putting yourself out there. And then also it cultural too, in the way that you were raised, because I know I was raised where you don't talk about your problems, you just deal with it. You know, you don't tell people your business, and you don't tell your family business. You know, I mean, that's how I was raised. You don't talk about my business.
Right. No,
don't
same.
Don't talk about my, I bet not hear that you was out there talking about my business. So a lot of times, especially 70s kids. So we suppressed a lot of things where it was things going on in the family that you had to keep it bottled up for years and years and years. Right. You better not be telling our family business out on the street, or I'm gonna whip your tail. How many times as 70 kids have we heard that? So changing the mind shift of being okay to talk about things because you were told you better not tell my business.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so so especially 70 kids.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I'm all over that. 72. I mean, I was born, so I mean, I'm all over that, and that very, you know, I remember I laughed. So you have Dancing with the Stars, we have Strictly Come Dancing. Gordon Ramsay, you'll know Gordon Ramsay from Hell's Kitchen. His daughter was dancing on this year's dancing equivalent of Dancing with the Stars.
Okay.
And he was in the studio watching Tilly dance with tears streaming down his face. The proud father, absolutely in pieces. And I was talking to my dad about it afterwards. Oh, did you see Gordon Ramsay? And my dad, bless him, absolutely ridiculous. Grown man crying on television. What is he doing showing all those emotions? He says, we were brought up not to show our emotions because it would make other people feel uncomfortable.
Wow.
And I think that pretty much sums it up. I mean, and I certainly, I've done a lot of work, you know, DBT and emotional intelligence and all of that side of things. And the recognition that there have been emotions that I would squash down, anger, fear, that I wouldn't articulate because I thought that wasn't socially acceptable. And even the positive emotions, like, it's funny, I have this internal mechanism that if I have moments of joy because I've spent time with some friends and I'm feeling joyous and so happy, I will then go back to the car and immediately go into OCD. Have I dropped something? I need to check everything. Almost like my body is like, oh, there's joy. I don't know if I can handle it. Let me bring her back down to ground and get her worrying about something. And so I think, you know, as you say about sharing your emotions and getting comfortable with that, has got to be a first step to being able to open up those conversations. And we have decades of programming that have given us 142 reasons why it's a bad thing to do. So we need to unpack that to be able to do it.
Right. And I'll go one step further with, so then that, you know, that's the way your dad was raised. My dad was raised. I have two brothers older than me, so I'm the baby. And then being a female, if you show your emotion, you want to talk about your feelings. Oh, she's emotional.
Yeah.
Oh, is it her period? Like, really seriously, because I'm trying to express myself. Mm-hmm. And so having that, being the only female and two brothers, and boys are told you don't cry.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I've got to be tough like a boy. Don't cry. You're strong too. You're strong. And I haven't during the pandemic, over the last year and a half, I have cried more in my life than any other, like, it's like almost every other day. And my car was stolen at one point on set, out of state. Production didn't want to talk about it, didn't tell me. They knew about it and didn't tell me, had me working the day anyways, and then didn't do anything, won't give me the insurance company's information so I can claim it on their policy while it happened under their watch, while I'm out of state at the same place. I cried for like 8 months every single day.
Wow. Gee.
And how does it feel after having had your 2 years or the 8 months of being able to cry and let it out? I mean, how does that feel in your body to being able to evacuate it rather than squash it down?
Well, I'm told it's a good thing because I'm finally letting it all out. I'm getting it out. At moments, like my back just like hurts so bad.
The physical aspect of it, of your emotions attacking you.
Definitely. I'm exactly the same. If I have a recently I had a very stressful situation for about 6 weeks and a very difficult conversation that I needed to have, and my neck froze up completely. Real pain in my neck. And I remember talking it through with my coach about I needed to have this conversation and running through what I needed to say. And my body started flailing around as though the energy was moving through the body. And it was my body telling me, this is a difficult situation, a difficult conversation you need to have. You need to have the conversation and let it leave your body. So similarly, I would imagine with your back getting the pain and that kind of, you know, the tears can represent very many different emotions, you know, from anger, sadness, frustration, fear, all sorts of things. It's your body telling you, listen, girl, there's something here that needs to be dealt with.
Yeah. And you have an extrovert, and Joanna, when you said that you are OCD, that must be tiresome. I mean, are you one to leave the house and get to the car and be like, to turn the iron off, and then you go back and then you look, then the iron, and then you go back to the car and be like, to turn the iron off, and then is that
or the
type
light
of
switch 30 times or something?
Yeah, be like, so because that has to be tiresome. If you're
tiresome. I'm not in any way in that scale.
Okay.
Now it could be I'm heading off to meet my friends for improv and I will double check that I've locked the door or things like that. It used to be that I would have checklists to leave the apartment and I would go around every room in the house. You laugh. Every room in the house, and I would have a tick box for every single plug socket, electrical socket in my wall. Is this off? Is this off? Is that light off? Is this off? I would, particularly when I'd be working late and really tired in the office, I would listen to this, talk about lunatic alert. I would take a video of the floor between my office to the lift, to down the lift, to the car park, to the car. So I would have a trace that I could double check that I hadn't dropped anything on the floor. And then I would drive around the car park for 5 or 10 minutes, double checking before I would get the courage to leave the car park and know that I hadn't left anything. There were moments where it was debilitating. I mean, I'm not the hand washer or I need to click it on and off 30 times, but there were intense moments. And as you say, that's exhausting. And the more tired I was, the more that would kind of rear its head. Yeah. So that's one of the big impacts of no longer being in that space and being a lot more relaxed and a lot more chilled. And what I now know is that was my attempt basically to control my environment.
Yeah.
Because I felt that everything else was out of control. And one of the things that with the work that I did with JJ, who's my co-host on the podcast that we did around DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, is that letting go of the control, because life is not black and white. We live it in the gray. But when we try to control the gray, that's where the problems can come. So how do you live in the gray? By recognizing and naming the emotions that come up, and then taking, calming calming exercises to be able to manage that rather than have it manage you. So that's a lot of the work that I've been doing that helps things.
So do you still have the checklist?
No, not really. There will be times when I get a bit angsty, particularly if I'm, as I say, those moments of, if I big high joy because I've had a really nice time, and then I start checking the car park, but I don't have the checklist anymore.
Okay. Congratulations.
Which is well, thank you. Which is really good. And there are people out there that have lived with this for years, and for whom it's, and they can't go outside their front door or whatever else. And so I've not been on that scale in any shape or form. But
they can't even leave the house. Yeah, they can't even leave the house.
Very much so. So I mean, in terms of, I had it easy, and I also recognize that can be that can just be a symptom when I'm having an emotional response to something. Okay. That can be one of the things that tells me you're having an emotional response to this. What's the emotion you're feeling? And then just kind of breathe through it and problem solve. Whereas before, I didn't realize that was a manifestation of some kind of emotional response.
Wow.
Well, we've kept you for far too long.
Oh, we can go on, but I know you're very busy.
I know. I would just like to cover two things if you have a moment. I would like to know and answer when you want, like, who are your role models growing up, or if you have any now, and then what advice would you give for our next generation of leading ladies?
I was going to ask that. Good question.
Oh, sorry.
No. I was too scared to ask.
You're too scared to ask another question that I would then take 10 minutes to answer.
No, because I didn't want to hold you up. I wanted to respect your time.
And if you don't have time.
No.
Thank you.
I'm loving this. I'm having a blast. I mean,
we are too.
It's the end of my day, so I'm all yours. Okay, so role models. It might sound cliched in some. My mum has always been a role model. We just didn't get on. When I was a kid, we would clash. Now we get on like a house on fire, and she's definitely one of my favorite people. But I think she's always been a role model just in her strength. And her mum was phenomenal. I mean, she's completely eccentric, registered blind, but it didn't stop her cooking and putting her hand over the gas to see if it was on, and all of that sort of thing. Role models.
No, your mom is a great one, because that's the first woman in front of us of how we see life.
Very much so.
How to treat others.
Yeah, very much so. And I think what's interesting is that both my parents have always been really strong role models. And when I was growing up, my dad was definitely a very key figure in my life for a lot of things. And it's only with retrospect that I can look back and see how much of a role model my mum was. And I think, well, I don't know if it's a general experience for a lot of people, but I think often it's mainly in looking back that we can really see where those role models are. Sometimes in the moment we can't see it. We don't see their influence until later, if that makes any sense.
Now, can I add a part B to that? Now, if you maybe the same, if you could have coffee with someone dead or alive, is it your mom, or would that kind of change perspective if you could have coffee with someone dead or alive today?
Well, I have coffee a lot with my mom, because the great thing is I moved back to Belfast.
Or tea.
Absolutely. Oh no, coffee. Oh, I'm all over the coffee. So she lives very close to me, so I see her a lot. It's an interesting one. So my maternal grandmother is someone that I absolutely adored as I was growing up, and she would always make brilliant cakes. And I remember going to stay with her, and we'd have supper in front of the television, and we'd have these sandwiches made out of soft bread rolls with ham and mayonnaise. and salt and vinegar, cheese and onion chips, and then she'd make chocolate cake with real chocolate on top. And so I've always had this really close relationship with my maternal grandmother, and less so with my paternal grandmother, because we had a lot of tension there. And it's interesting when you say, if I could have coffee with anyone dead or alive, I would probably go for my paternal grandmother that I didn't get on with.
Okay.
Because in the 30 years since she died, I've done all of this work and a lot more self-aware about how my thoughts and beliefs kind of frame my decisions and the way I live my life. And I would be curious to ask my granny about her life and see how that impacted maybe some of the decisions and the way she acted, and the way that I interacted with her, that maybe I could get more understanding and have more grace and compassion for her than I did when she was alive.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
That's
I keep asking,
beautiful.
does that make sense? And it's like, well, no,
I
Joe.
know.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
does.
It absolutely does.
And then the last
Um,
one is for the next
advice?
generation. Advice for the next generation. I mean, you kicked a lot of gems these 6 hours.
And we're only starting. I think probably the advice that I would give to the next generation of leaders would be to have the confidence in themselves that they are enough just as they are, and that the best way to show up is to be themselves, and not to try to fit into a box, and not to try to understand that sometimes there are constraints around it, but that fundamentally and at their core, who they are is more than good enough for them to be whoever they want to be and to do whatever they want to do. And I wish I'd learned that a long time before now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good advice.
That's all we need to know right there. You said it all.
Yep. Eloquently, Joanna. You said it eloquently.
Yeah. That's been a big learning for me for the last 18 months. Which is why I'll give you one example, and then I'll be quiet because you've had enough.
No, we love this.
We love this.
I think one of the podcast, remember I mentioned that they'd be 3 minutes before go live on this particular podcast, I spilled my tea and then spent all the time cleaning it up.
Figuratively and literally.
In a different life, in a previous life, an incarnation of myself, and not very long ago, I would not have gone live. I would have cleared up the place, kept my podcast host waiting, made sure everything was perfect, and then we would have started, even if that meant starting 10 minutes late.
Okay.
Whereas in this life, in this moment in my life where I know I can be myself and that is enough, I knew that it didn't matter if I had tea dripping down everywhere and the cat walking through it and everything else, because I knew that me just being was all anyone needed. It took me a hell of a long time to learn that.
I think the pandemic helped all of us
Yeah.
kind of get there and learn that
Absolutely.
perspective.
Yes.
Amen to that.
Yes. I would have loved to see the cat.
So
walking
what
through the tea.
do you still do your podcast?
So we don't do the podcast at the moment. We did it for about 24 episodes. It's called Joe and JJ Go Mental.
Okay.
And my co-host Dr. JJ Kelly is a clinical psychologist based out in California. And so we would come together, talk about different aspects around mental health, and then we would interview people from both sides of the Atlantic about mental health and about different aspects linked to that. Everyone from a horse whisperer working with veterans with PTSD to a lady who was in a wheelchair because she'd put on a lot of weight, and then the doctor said, well, you're always going to be in a wheelchair, and she's got herself out of the wheelchair doing amazing things and working with other
Fantastic.
Wow. Yes.
people, to someone working on the whole mental health structure around bipolar and community and challenging pharmaceuticals and the pharmaceutical approach to mental health and all of these sort of things. So we had some fun times.
Oh, you should keep it going. It sounds great.
Yes.
I'm gonna have to go check it out and watch some episodes.
Yes.
Watch this space. It will be back at some point in the
Great.
Brilliant. Listen, thank you so much. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you for being here.
It's been so fun to talk. And
I have another question. Oh my God. So coming from, corporate world and everything, and now you're a life coach. Do you think that's important for everybody to either have someone in your life as a life coach? We recently learned about, Renee, what was that page said, a doula,
because I'm thinking about doing it. Yeah.
a doula for
doula.
Pregnancy. That's a new word. Do you know what a doula is, Joanna?
Is that the lady that helps you have a baby, basically, but not like a midwife, but helps you
through the whole process?
Through the whole process.
Yeah.
And I think they also an equivalent for the end of life as well. I think there are people that.
I think it is. Yeah. Now that I think about it, I think I'll do the babies.
So is it important to have a coach? Is it important to have a coach?
I think that it is.
Yeah.
I think I see my role as a coach. My role as a coach is not to tell you what to do. My role as a coach is to be a sounding board so that you can find the answers that already exist in your own innate intelligence and life experience. And sometimes having that life coach, that sounding board helps. And where I bring a particular value around that, particularly for people working in corporate, is that I've done the job. I've been the executive, I've been the leader, I've had the real life constraints on that, so that when I'm working with someone as an executive coach in that context, talking about work-life balance, I know that it's not as easy as saying to them, well, listen, just leave the office at 5 o'clock. Or I know that if they're there saying, I don't want to go for this promotion, I'm not going to say, oh, but you have to because you're a role model for everyone in the team. I know that if you're saying you don't want to go for this promotion, it could be from a place of fear, but if we know that that's not the case, it could also be that this job is already killing you and you just don't want to kind of go over the edge. So I think to have that kind of sounding board where you can just have someone to hold the space and ask you questions and challenge you to think in a different way, I think can be really helpful. And I know that from my own experience with the coaches I've worked with, they've been invaluable to getting me to where I am in my business and in my life, a lot sooner than I might have done otherwise.
Yeah, coaches are good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on our podcast and sharing all this with us. It's been amazing.
Well, thank you for having me. I've just had such a good time. Thank you so much.
If someone wants to reach out to you for coaching advice or learning more about workplace life or work-life balance, how can they get in touch with you?
So my website is joannadenton.com. That they can contact me there if they want to talk about work-life balance. They can set up a 45-minute consult and we'll just have a chat and see what's going on and if there's any way I can help. And then in the not too distant future, I don't have a date yet, but I'm going to be doing a series of online kind of roundtables. There's got to be more to life than this, where we're going to talk about what are the reasons that we find it difficult to get sustainable balance in our life. So kind of introducing the Shitty Committee and then seeing how the Shitty Committee can turn our superpowers into the shadow side that stops us from this balance. And then what are some small things that we can do as the next first step to moving forward to getting a bit of balance around. So you can find me there on LinkedIn, Instagram, all of those sort of places.
And your podcast, where can we listen to that?
pretty much anywhere, Spotify, Apple, wherever. So Joe and JJ Go Mental. You will find that. But we can share those details in the show notes or
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks to all of you for tuning in to this week's episode with leading lady Joanna Denton. Thank you for sharing your experience with us today. And for more of our content, you can follow us on our social media at heap_ent. And if you have any feedback, suggestions, collab pitches, or anything you want to tell us, you can reach out team at heapent@gmail.com. And until next time, continue leading ladies.
Continue to be in the leading ladies that you are to make a positive difference in the world.
Yes.
Bye-bye now.